Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso, 1881 to 1973, was a renowned Spanish artist who excelled in painting, sculpture, printmaking, ceramics, and theatre design. Along with Georges Braque, he co-founded the Cubist movement, pioneered constructed sculpture, played a role in the development of collage, and explored a diverse range of artistic styles. Picasso was born in the city of Malaga, Andalusia, in southern Spain. He showed exceptional artistic talent from an early age and began formal art training under his father, who was an art professor. The artist quickly surpassed his father's abilities and enrolled in advanced classes at the Royal Academy of San Fernando in Madrid, when he was just 15 years old. In 1901, he moved to Paris, the center of the art world at the time. Pablo Picasso went through several distinct artistic periods throughout his career, each marked by unique styles, themes, and influences. Blue Period, 1901 to 1904. Picasso's Blue Period, which lasted from 1901 to 1904, is one of the most distinctive and influential phases in his artistic career. During this period, Picasso's paintings were dominated by shades of blue and blue-green, and his artworks often depicted themes of poverty, despair, and isolation. Picasso spent a significant amount of time in Barcelona and Paris, where he encountered the poverty-stricken individuals living on the fringes of society. He was touched by their struggles and often portrayed beggars, drunks, the old, and the frail, reflecting the somber atmosphere of this period. The Blue Period was characterized by a melancholic and introspective mood, reflecting Picasso's own emotional state and the social and political context of the time. Rose Period, 1904 to 1906, Picasso's Rose Period, which spanned from 1904 to 1906, marked a distinct shift in his artistic style and subject matter after the somber Blue Period. Picasso's paintings were characterized by warmer tones, predominantly shades of pink and rose, hence the name Rose Period. The artworks often featured circus performers, acrobats, harlequins, and other theatrical characters, reflecting a more cheerful and optimistic mood compared to the earlier Blue Period. Picasso spent significant time in Paris during the Rose Period, where he was exposed to the vibrant artistic and cultural milieu of the city. The artist was inspired by French art, literature, and popular entertainment of the time, including the cabaret and circus performances. Artists like Henri Toulouse-Lautrec and the French symbolists had an impact on his work, encouraging him to explore themes related to the circus and theatrical life. The Rose Period remains a significant chapter in Picasso's artistic journey, showcasing his ability to capture both the melancholic and joyful aspects of the human experience. African Art and Primitivism, 1907 to 1909. The Rose Period eventually gave way to Picasso's African and Iberian art-inspired period between 1907 and 1909, leading to the development of Cubism, a groundbreaking artistic movement co-founded by Picasso and Georges Braque. Picasso, along with other avant-garde artists of his time, became fascinated with African tribal art. They were captivated by the expressive forms, geometric shapes, and symbolic meanings found in African masks, sculptures, and artifacts. Picasso, in particular, admired the abstraction and distortion of human figures in African art, which challenged conventional Western notions of representation. In addition to African art, Picasso was also influenced by the ancient Iberian art of the Iberian Peninsula, with their simple and bold shapes. Picasso and his contemporaries were also deeply influenced by primitivism. The term primitivism refers to the romanticization of non-Western cultures and the belief that these so-called primitive societies possessed a purity, authenticity, and directness lacking in Western civilization. During this period, Picasso's paintings and sculptures began to incorporate elements inspired by African and Iberian art. Geometric shapes. Picasso adopted the angular and geometric forms found in African and Iberian sculptures. He started to deconstruct and distort the human figure, breaking it down into simplified geometric shapes and sharp angles. Mask-like faces. Picasso's figures began to resemble masks, with flattened and exaggerated facial features. Eyes, noses, and mouths were often depicted as if seen from multiple viewpoints simultaneously, reflecting the influence of African masks. Bold outlines. Thick, bold outlines and dark contours became prominent in Picasso's work, emphasizing the delineation of forms and contributing to the overall sense of abstraction. One of the most famous artworks from this period is Picasso's painting titled Les Demoiselles Avignon. This groundbreaking painting depicts 5 nude figures with mask-like faces and distorted bodies, showcasing the influence of African and Iberian art. Les Demoiselles Avignon is considered a pivotal work in the history of modern art, as it challenged traditional artistic conventions and paved the way for the development of Cubism. Picasso's exploration of African art and primitivism laid the foundation for his later collaboration with Georges Braque and the co-creation of Cubism, an innovative and revolutionary art movement that completely transformed the way artists approached representation and abstraction in the early 20th century. Analytic Cubism, 1909 to 1912. Analytic Cubism is a style of art that was developed by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque between 1909 and 1912. It is considered the first phase of the Cubist movement, which was a revolutionary approach to representing reality in art. Analytic Cubism is characterized by the artist's analytical deconstruction and reassembly of objects and figures into geometric shapes, emphasizing the two-dimensional nature of the canvas and challenging traditional perspective and representation. In analytic cubism, objects and figures are broken down into geometric shapes such as cubes, spheres, and cones. These shapes are fragmented and rearranged, depicting the subject from multiple viewpoints at once. There is often use of monochromatic palette dominated by earthy tones, browns, grays, and blacks. This subdued color scheme allows viewers to focus on the form and structure rather than color. Objects and figures are depicted in a complex and fragmented manner, making it challenging for the viewer to identify the subject immediately. This ambiguity is intentional, as it encourages viewers to engage with the artwork and decipher the fragmented shapes. Picasso's interest in African and Iberian art is evident in analytic cubism. He was inspired by the geometric shapes and expressive qualities of African masks and Iberian sculptures, which influenced the development of Cubist style. Analytic cubism laid the foundation for later phases of the Cubist movement, such as synthetic cubism, which incorporated collage elements and a more vibrant color palette. Picasso's contributions to analytic cubism, along with Braque and other artists of the time, revolutionized the way artists approached representation, leading to a significant shift in the course of art history. Synthetic Cubism, 1912 to 1919. In the synthetic cubist period, Picasso, along with Braque, developed a new approach to cubism. Unlike the earlier analytic cubism, which deconstructed forms into fragmented shapes and analyzed them from multiple viewpoints. Synthetic Cubism focused on simplifying and synthesizing forms using flat shapes and bright colors. Synthetic Cubist phase introduced a broader range of colors into their artworks. Bright hues, often in flat and non-naturalistic tones, were used to depict different elements within the composition. The artists, in this period, created collages by incorporating real-life materials, such as newspaper clippings, wallpapers and objects, into their artworks. These collaged elements added texture, depth, and a sense of everyday reality to the compositions. Despite the incorporation of real-world elements, synthetic Cubist artworks continued to simplify and abstract forms. Objects and figures were still broken down into geometric shapes, but these shapes were now more defined, often outlined in bold black lines, and filled with various textures and patterns. Picasso and Braque explored different techniques to create textures within the compositions. They used a variety of materials, such as sand, sawdust, or even glue, to add texture to the painted surfaces. This interplay of textures added a tactile quality to the artworks. One of Picasso's notable synthetic Cubist works is the collage painting Still Life with Chair Caning. In this artwork, Picasso incorporated a piece of oilcloth with a chair caning pattern, along with painted elements, creating a mixed media composition that blurred the lines between painting and sculpture. Picasso and Braque's innovative techniques during this period had a significant impact on the development of modern art. Neoclassicism and Surrealism, 1919 to 1929. Between 1919 and 1929, Pablo Picasso explored two distinct yet influential artistic movements, Neoclassicism and Surrealism. In the aftermath of World War I, Picasso moved away from the abstract and cubist styles he had developed earlier and turned towards a more classical and traditional approach. This period, known as Neoclassicism, 1919 to 1924, was characterized by a return to classical forms and themes. Picasso focused on more realistic and figurative representations of the human form. He painted classical themes such as mythological scenes, bathers, and portraits, often employing classical composition and idealized forms. The artworks of this period often featured warm and earthy tones, moving away from the bold colors of Picasso's earlier Cubist and synthetic Cubist phases. In the late 1920s, Picasso transitioned into Surrealism, 1925 to 1929, a movement which was characterized by exploring the subconscious mind, dreams, and irrationality. While Picasso was never a formal member of the Surrealist group, his work during this period exhibited Surrealist tendencies. During this time, his paintings often featured distorted and dreamlike figures, merging reality and fantasy. Picasso also incorporated elements of automatism, a technique where the artist allows their subconscious mind to guide their hand, creating spontaneous and experimental compositions. The period 1930 to 1939. The period between 1930 and 1939 was a significant time in Pablo Picasso's artistic career. One of the notable aspects of this period was his exploration of Surrealism, a movement that was gaining prominence in the art world. In the early 1930s, Picasso's work began to reflect a more classical and traditional style, characterized by a return to more representational forms. However, as the decade progressed, he became increasingly interested in the surrealistic movement, which was marked by dreamlike and fantastical imagery, often depicting distorted and abstracted figures. One of Picasso's iconic works from this period is the painting Guernica, created in 1937. This powerful and large-scale mural portrays the horrors of the Spanish Civil War, particularly the bombing of the town of Guernica by German and Italian air forces supporting General Francisco Franco's nationalist forces. The painting is characterized by its monochromatic palette and fragmented, distorted figures, reflecting the chaos and tragedy of war. Guernica is considered one of Picasso's most important works and a powerful anti-war statement. Apart from Guernica, Picasso created numerous other artworks during the 1930s, experimenting with different styles and themes. He also continued his exploration of Cubism, a movement he co-founded, although his approach to Cubism became more refined and less radical during this period. In addition to painting, Picasso also worked on sculptures, ceramics, and prints during the 1930s, showcasing his versatility as an artist. World War II in the late 1940s, 1939 to 1949. During World War II in the late 1940s, 1939 to 1949, Pablo Picasso, like many artists of his time, lived through a period of political upheaval and personal challenges. The war, the occupation of France by Nazi forces, and the aftermath deeply affected Picasso's life and art. Picasso, a Spanish citizen, chose to remain in France during the war, even though he was not required to do so. Despite the difficult circumstances, Picasso continued to create art during the war years. His work during this time often reflected the somber mood of the period. He produced paintings, drawings, and sculptures, although the scarcity of art supplies and the constraints of the war had an impact on the materials he could use. After the liberation of Paris in 1944, Picasso became an active member of the French Communist Party. He embraced communist ideology and his art took on more overtly political themes, reflecting his commitment to social justice and political activism. In the post-war years, Picasso's work began to reflect a sense of hope and optimism as Europe sought to rebuild after the devastation of the war. His art became more colorful, and he experimented with different styles and techniques, including ceramics and lithography. He transitioned into a style known as lyrical abstraction, incorporating brighter colors and more fluid forms into his work. Picasso also started to incorporate classical elements into his paintings and sculptures, displaying a synthesis of his earlier avant-garde styles with more traditional and classical aesthetics. One of the notable works from this period is the series of lithographs titled The Bulls. In these lithographs, Picasso explored the theme of the bull, a motif that had appeared frequently in his earlier works. The series is characterized by bold and expressive lines, capturing the strength and vitality of the bull, and reflecting Picasso's fascination with this powerful animal. Post-war works and final years, 1949 to 1973, the period from 1949 until his death in 1973, Picasso continued to evolve as an artist, exploring various styles, techniques, and mediums, leaving behind a vast body of work that showcased his innovative spirit and artistic mastery. He embraced ceramics and sculpture, creating innovative and imaginative pieces. His late works were characterized by a return to more classical themes, but he approached them with a unique and modern perspective. Picasso became increasingly interested in printmaking, particularly lithography. He created numerous lithographs, etchings, and linocuts, showcasing his skills in this medium. His graphic works from this period are highly regarded for their innovation and artistic quality. In the 1960s, Picasso returned to Cubism, a movement he co-founded, in his own unique way. He combined elements of late Cubism with influences from popular culture, incorporating everyday objects and imagery into his artworks. This period showcased his adaptability and willingness to experiment with new ideas. Picasso remained incredibly productive until his death in 1973, continued to work on paintings, sculptures, and drawings with remarkable energy and enthusiasm. His later works often displayed a sense of introspection and contemplation, reflecting the wisdom and maturity of an artist who had lived through and influenced numerous artistic movements. One of the notable works from Picasso's later years is the painting Self-Portrait Facing Death, 1972, which is considered a poignant reflection on mortality. In this painting, Picasso depicted himself with a skeletal face, a representation of his awareness of his own mortality as he approached the end of his life. Pablo Picasso left behind an extraordinary artistic legacy that continues to inspire and captivate audiences around the world. His artworks reflect a lifetime of artistic innovation, creativity, and a relentless pursuit of artistic expression, making him one of the most enduring and influential artists in the history of art.